Hello and welcome to the latest MS Hear from the Experts webinar. This series is helping people better understand multiple sclerosis, highlights MS-related resources, plus provides tools and tips to navigate their MS journey with more knowledge and confidence. Our intention is to help you learn more about this disease, treatments, research, wellness strategies, our programs, and much more. My name is Gabrielle Vito, and I'm coming to you today from beautiful Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. As a person with MS myself, I'm a longtime MS volunteer since my own diagnosis way back in 1996. I currently sit on the executive for the MS Ambassador Program, and it's a real privilege for me to be here today as your moderator for today's broadcast. Now, before we get started with our presentations, let's briefly go over a couple of housekeeping items. Your microphones have been muted and will remain muted for the entirety of today's broadcast. If you have questions for today's panelists, please type it into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen at any time during today's presentation. We'll be getting to as many questions as possible following the formal presentation. And we have also received some pre-submitted questions to get going with once the presentation is done. Now, our session today is also being broadcast on Facebook Live, and we welcome that audience to also type any questions directly into your chat box at any point during today's presentation. And again, we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the session. Now, please note that questions pertaining specifically to your personal situation likely cannot be answered in this kind of a forum. We recommend that you contact your personal healthcare team or perhaps contact a navigator at the MS Knowledge Network for your specific personal questions. This session is being recorded today and will be available soon on our website in English. We're also adding French subtitles to the recording, but that version won't be available for a few weeks. Now, these recordings will be available on the MS website under Nationwide Webinars from the archived page. And of course, they'll also be on the YouTube channel. A Facebook recording will also be made available. Now, please note that the MS Society of Canada, as always, does not approve, endorse, or recommend any specific product, therapy, or service, but provides information to assist individuals in making their own health and wellness decisions. Now, today's broadcast is an opportunity to learn more about resiliency. Building resilience is an important part of maintaining and protecting mental health. Creating resilience is a journey that takes time, effort, and practice. Having resilience can help you keep moving forward even in the face of difficulty. Our expert today is Rebecca Higgins. She's worked in community and social services for more than 20 years, specializing in mental health education since 2010. She has a master's degree in social work and a BA in English. Rebecca has designed and facilitated workshops and webinars for a wide range of groups, including educators, caregivers, customer service professionals, and many more. In addition, she served as a panelist and presenter at numerous conferences, delivered keynote speeches on mental health, and provided consultation support to community mental health initiatives. She's lived and worked in Ireland, Honduras, and Brazil. We're very, very lucky to have her expertise with us today. Thank you for being here, and welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle, and thank you everyone for being with us today for this session. So today we're talking about concrete strategies for building resilience. We'll talk a little bit about, I'm very interested in practical strategies, things any of us can do, things that are simple that may be already things that we're already doing. So I'm interested to talk to you about this today and get to some of your questions later. So I'll invite you, if you're able to and interested, I invite you to have something to write with and something to write on. There are some reflection opportunities throughout this session, and I find whenever I'm talking about resilience and wellness resources, I invite people to take stock of what is already working for them, where they find joy and support, and so part of that process is taking notes as you go. So if you're interested, please feel free to do that. Something to write on and something to write with. So what I'm going to invite you to do today And I'm going to invite you to do this first, and then we'll go through it and talk about it in different ways. I'm going to invite you to draw your mind map of resources. So what I mean by this is it's essentially what we used to call a flow chart, where you draw yourself or write yourself at the center, and then there are little branches coming out for the people, things, and places that you're finding supportive lately. I'll show you my example, and it's not terribly high tech, the way I drew it there with a glorified version of clip art. So if you're doing it by hand, if that doesn't work for you, if you'd rather just reflect, or if you have somebody with you taking notes, or you want to do an audio recording for yourself, whatever is most accessible and most useful for you. So I did this activity for myself fairly recently when I received some hard health news in our family. And so one of my ways to digest that was to take stock of my own resources. And I have found it helpful to do this visually so that I can see it in front of me. So I'll invite you to put yourself at the center and then draw these little lines out, adding around the center the people, places, and things that you are finding supportive lately. So I'll give you a couple of moments to do that now. So it's 7:10 EST, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes to 7:13 EST, and then we'll continue on. So give you an opportunity to work on your mind map for a moment. Just about a minute left for this exercise as you work on your own mind map of resources. What resources are you finding supportive these days? What people, places, and things are shoring up your resilience these days? We'll continue on in just one moment. Okay, perfect. So hopefully this gave you a bit of an opportunity to take stock of your own resources and the people and places and things that are helping you these days or that you're finding supportive. And this can certainly change over time. It can even change a little bit from week to week. For example, there might be some moments where certain kinds of exercise are more possible than others. Or there might be moments when your work means something different to you than it does in other moments. So recognizing that this can be a bit fluid, what I've done is I return to my mind map from time to time and just kind of take stock, just do a new one, kind of see what kinds of resources and strategies are working for me these days. So we'll go through each of these categories and talk a little bit about how they can be things that shore up our resilience. So the first category that I'm giving you today is people. I like this reminder from an article called The Secret to Building Resilience from the Harvard Business Review. It reminds us that building resilience is not a solo endeavor. Quote, resilience is not something we need to find deep down inside ourselves. We can actually become more resilient in the process of connecting with others in our most challenging times. And that is certainly something that I have found to be true in my life and in my work with other people, is that connection is really central in terms of our resilience. We can't be resilient on an island. We can't be resilient in a vacuum. Interdependency and interconnection is really important for our well-being and our resilience. So thinking about this is sometimes I use the language of who's in your lifeboat. So I'll invite you to just jot this down for yourself. You can make a list if you're feeling really creative and energetic today. Perhaps you want to draw a boat and put some people in the boat. But I usually use this predominantly as a metaphor in terms of who's in your lifeboat, because I think ideally we need more than one person in our lifeboat. Now, you may have a pet in your lifeboat as well, and that is just as valid. So when I'm talking about who's in your lifeboat, I mean people and pets, people and animals, who's in your lifeboat. And this is your most important people. The lifeboat is, if you had to save some people from the sinking ship, who would you put in there? The lifeboat is the people you turn to when things are difficult. And they're there in times of joy as well. But I think whenever possible, if you look around your lifeboat and you see that there is only one person or one animal in the lifeboat, it can be helpful to think about what can we do to get some other people in there. You don't have to crowd the lifeboat. I mean, everybody has different sizes of lifeboats. But I think when we have more than one person in the lifeboat, it gives everybody some choice. Because what happens if you need that person and they're unavailable that day, right? Or they've got their own stuff going on. If you have another person in the lifeboat, that gives everybody some choice. Additionally, if you are in somebody else's lifeboat and you're the only one in there, you feel like you're the only person they have in the world, they don't have any connections with anybody else, it can be really important to work with the person you're supporting or caring for to get some other people in the lifeboat as well, so that they have choices and so that all of the pressure doesn't go on one person. I have found this to be a useful exercise in a couple of different ways. I'll give you some examples. So I have some experience with depression. And what I learned in the early years of this experience is that it could be heavy for other people to deal with, right? And so I found over time, I kind of developed a little network of people that I could lean on and who leaned on me. And I'm very lucky because I have a nice little handful of people I can turn to. And what that means is it doesn't all fall on the shoulders of one person. And depending what I'm looking for, I might need somebody to make me laugh, or I might need somebody to help to listen to me, right? I might just need a hug. When I have different people in my lifeboat, it supports my autonomy in the kinds of support I need. I'll just share another example as well. For many years, I was the primary person in the lifeboat of a sibling of mine. And that became unsustainable, both for him and for me. There was a lot of resentment and difficulty and a lot of pressure on both of us when there was only me in the lifeboat. It turns out there were plenty of other people in the main ship who were very happy to get in the lifeboat with us. But I had decided in early days, no, this is my job. Nobody can do it better than me. I'll be running the lifeboat from here on in. It turns out it's much better for him and it's much better for me now that we have some other people in the lifeboat with us. So one of the ways that we can build resilience in a really concrete, strategic way is to look at who's in our lifeboat and to look at whether we should get some more people in there and whether if we're the only person in someone else's lifeboat, what can we do to strengthen their network of support, to get more support for them so it's not just us. Another tool that's helpful when we're talking about people, places, and things, another concrete tip for building resilience that I have found helpful, both professionally and personally, is when things are hard, tell someone. Consider telling a trusted friend, colleague, peer, a volunteer, somebody you trust, somebody it's safe to talk to. Perhaps a counselor or another professional support, an anonymous call or text option. In my experience, saying the scary or difficult thing out loud takes away some of its power. Sometimes if you like writing and you find that therapeutic, if you're not able to say it out loud, it can be helpful to write it down. Sometimes that in itself helps me to say the scary thing out loud. The difficult thing out loud, though, is sometimes even better. So sometimes writing it down is enough, but when oftentimes telling someone, now you could tell them in writing, sure. But in my experience, when I have been able to say the scariest things out loud, it's a little bit less difficult to manage because I don't feel like I'm holding it all alone. It still feels scary. It still may be a really difficult thing. I'm not suggesting that saying it out loud makes everything okay. But in my experience, when I'm able to say the hard things out loud, it helps me to feel less alone. And that's a really important thing in terms of building resilience, is remembering that we're not alone and connecting to support so we can feel that deeply, that we're not alone. If you are interested in, so I think connecting is about, of course, it has many dimensions. It's about reaching out and supporting others, and it's being willing to be supported as well. And in some seasons of our lives, we're both. In some seasons, we're doing more supporting, or we might be doing more asking or receiving support, and that's okay. There's different seasons of our life, as I said, different moments when support we need, and our relationship with support is different. But I think all human beings need support. And I think it benefits us to reach out and connect with others and let them know that we're there for them as well. So at some point, if you're interested in this, I like this resource called gratefulness.org. There is a part of the website that has free e-cards. And so, they have all kinds of ones that you can send, simple little nature ones. Some have religious or spiritual messages, some don't. You just choose whatever is most resonant and appropriate for you. And it can be just a little card to send someone to say, you know what, thank you, or I'm thinking of you, I hope you're doing okay. Just an easy, soft, gentle way to reach out, to let somebody else know that they're not alone, and to help you to connect with somebody else as well. So that's the people part of the resource map that we talked about, the mind map of people, places, and things. Now I'd like to speak to the places part for a moment. So think about what places give you comfort, what places shore up your resilience. It could be a comforting spot in your home. It could be connecting with nature on the balcony, in the backyard, in a park, on the front porch, in your neighborhood, in the woods or by the sea, in the fields. It's also about noticing the world around you. So perhaps paying attention to the plants in your space, or your pet, or getting cozy, paying attention to how the blanket feels. Maybe if you're out in the world, looking up or looking down, looking at, sometimes we get so used to going the same path in our day-to-day that we don't notice the world around us anymore. So sometimes it's about mixing it up and trying a different route, or just being more deliberate in how we look at the world around us. Another example of a place might be enjoying a library or cafe or museum. And getaways, big or small. So depending on your resources, the season of your life, what support you have, your mobility, and so on, perhaps a large getaway is not doable or desirable right now. But is there a small getaway? Visiting a family member nearby, going to an Airbnb in the next town, having a small day trip. What kind of getaways, big or small, are possible for you these days? And are these potential sources of resilience for you? And so I'll explain my examples of some of these. So for me, there's a chair in the corner over there in my apartment, which is very comforting. That's my reading spot, and I can look at my plants there. Connecting with nature, listening to the wind in particular, being by the water whenever I can, going to the library, enjoying a coffee, going to the art gallery, and sometimes I go on little retreats, sort of self-created retreats. I just go to an Airbnb for a night or two by myself as a way to replenish and retreat. So for me, those are some of the places that are included on my mind map. Those are just examples, of course. No need to follow my examples. I'm just giving you some ideas and inviting you to think about your own places that are comforting. So what places nurture you? What places nurture you? So return to your mind map for a moment. See if there's anything you'd like to add there. Places that nurture you. And turning to those places in times of difficulty, this is an important strategy for building resilience. If we're not able to go to the place itself, what can we do to modify it, to make it more accessible for our particular space and time? Or if we're not able to go there, can we look at pictures of it? Can we share memories with a loved one of that place? So there are ways to access the place even if you can't go to the place yourself today. So, for example, swimming is very important to me. At the moment, I have COVID, so I can't go swimming. However, sometimes when I'm trying to sleep, I imagine myself swimming, and that experience of immersing myself in the pool, even though it's imaginary, is somewhat soothing. It's not as good as being there, I'll be honest, but it's a decent substitute. So I'll invite you to jot down for yourself what places nurture you at the moment. Okay, so we looked at people in terms of our mind map of resources. We looked at places, and now we're going to look at things. So the most useful tip, my favorite thing I learned in social work school, is when faced with a large, overwhelming task or circumstance, break big things down into smaller, more manageable pieces and do one thing at a time. This can seem very difficult. Sometimes there's not much to be done in terms, it's not always task related, right? But when we're facing something difficult, when we're dealing with overwhelm, again and again, this has been a source of comfort and resilience for me when I am able to break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces. Okay, what am I going to do today? So I'm going to read one blog post today around this particular topic. That's it for today. One thing at a time. When we're able to do one thing at a time, it helps to prevent that overwhelm that kind of crushes us into stasis, right? Sometimes when we're faced with difficulty, when our resilience is challenged for lots of really good reasons, Sometimes the overwhelm is knocking at the door and we just see the huge wall of it coming at us, and it feels really overwhelming and we're not able to do anything. When we're able to break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces, it helps encourage us to have the motivation to keep facing the difficult thing and to take some steps towards facing it or to completing the task or whatever it is. So breaking big things down into smaller, more manageable pieces is certainly something that has helped me in times of overwhelm, and I hope is something that will help you too. The next invitation is to look at your mind map and make sure you've added on there something that you love to do. Not very long ago, no, I guess actually it was a couple years ago now. I've lost all track of time with the pandemic. Not very long ago, a wise person said to me, a wise therapist, talked to me about how things I love to do, they were also resources for me. They were also strategies for building resilience. And I had never thought of it that way. I had never thought of things that I love to do as resources, but it's absolutely true. Whether or not you're able to do the thing you love to do today doesn't mean it's not a resource anymore. Sometimes we have to modify what we did before. Sometimes we don't have the energy or time to do it today, but it'll be there next week or the week after. Sometimes we can't do that, but we can do something related. So identifying the things that you love to do can be an important step towards shoring up your resilience. So I'll invite you to jot down on your map there, make sure that you have one or two things at least that you love to do. Okay, so the great Maya Angelou reminded us that you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. And I believe that we may not all see ourselves as artistic, but all human beings are creative. That's one of the things that makes us uniquely creative, uniquely human rather, is our creativity. So I'll invite you to look at your mind map and add anything you like to it in terms of how are you creative these days? In what ways are you creative? That's my question. In what ways are you creative? So some examples could be cooking, gardening, how you plan your day, meal planning, being with the kids, crafting, singing, any kind of music. These are just some examples. For me, lately I've really been into drawing mandalas with gel pens. I find very soothing. Circle shapes, find that very soothing. I often change my creative practice. It sort of ebbs and flows depending on what I feel like. Many people find baking creative and enjoyable. I like the product. I don't like the process, but I know people really do. So just adding to your map, in what ways are you creative? Okay, so I'm going to offer some more suggestions of the people, places, and things that can support your resilience. So this is not an exhaustive list, but as I go through these, if anything resonates, if anything feels appropriate for you, add this to your mind map as well. Rest, really, really important. We need physical rest, of course, but we also need emotional rest. We need some solitude. We need different kinds of rest. We need appropriate, supportive, and accessible healthcare. We need individual therapeutic support. So this could be talk therapy or massage therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, different kinds of therapeutic support that may be in your sort of in your basket of wellness tools, or for the purposes of our conversation today, on your mind map of resources. Support groups. So this could be formal or informal. It might be a group of people you intentionally meet with who are sharing the same experience, such as other people with MS or other caregivers or care partners, or other parents or other children of older folks. There's lots of different support groups that might be formal, but also informal. So sometimes, for example, a lot of my friends have school-aged kids, and so they have sort of developed, they wouldn't call them support groups, but these informal communities of support at pick up and drop off. It might also be at the dog park, or, excuse me, other volunteers, other people you work with, for example, other people you see at the gym or in the neighborhood. So it sometimes is deliberate, intentional support groups, and sometimes it's more informal social support. Faith and spiritual communities can be an incredible source of resilience. Spiritual practices, either that you do on your own or in community, really important sources of resilience. Pets and plants, both or one or the other can, I think, bring a lot of joy, and in so doing, be one of your tools for building resilience. Friends and family, online resources of various kinds. It could be, an online class. It could be, Facebook groups that you connect with. It could be reaching out for support to the MS Society or to other groups online. Lots of different ways that people are connecting online, particularly in the pandemic era. Activities that bring you joy. As I mentioned, this has been a really important source of resilience for me. Some more potential people, places, and things that can support your resilience. Again, don't be afraid to add these to your own mind map as we go, the ones that stick out for you, or if this sparks your thinking in any other direction and you think of some other resources that work for you, please add them. Some other ones might be social time, whether remote or in person. Humor could be comedies you're watching, comedy you're listening to, or humor with particular people in your life. Books, music, art, physical activity, creative work, cultural and community work, including volunteer work, being in nature, and reconnecting with meaning, hope, and purpose. All of these things and more can be really important, concrete strategies, things that we add to our lives or that are often already there that we can turn to shore us up, to help to protect and develop our resilience further. So now's the time I'll turn it back over to the moderator for questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Rebecca, thank you so much for being here and for giving us a lot of food for thought. Really, really great examples in there to have us thinking and having us maybe look at things in a different way as contributing to our resilience. Because I think so many of us, it really struck me when you said it's not necessarily something you need to dig down inside for. It can be many things already in your life, and you maybe need to reframe how you look at them. That really struck me. So thank you. So it is time now for our question segment. Again, if you have a question, please type it into the chat box, either on Zoom or on Facebook Live, and we'll get to as many of them as we can in the next few minutes here. So I'm going to start with some folks who've already submitted questions. The first one has to do with depression. If someone already has a diagnosis of depression, is it possible to develop greater resilience as you battle depression?
Thank you for asking that, Gabrielle. So as a person who has experienced periods of depression myself, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Not one of my favorite things to experience, but one of my favorite things to talk about. So I think that one of the kind of hallmarks of depression, at least in my experience of it, is that it doesn't always tell me the truth. It kind of can skew my view of how I see myself and the world and my own resources. So, one of the things that has helped me is I actually, during my first bad low, I kept track of things in what I called a wellness workbook. I wrote down the kinds of things that I found helpful and not so helpful, both in terms of how people responded to me and tools that I tried as well. So, because I figured I would forget many of them, and I did. So, going back to that later helped me to remember some of the things that helped me. So I think taking notes where you can. Sometimes we don't have the energy or capacity for that, and that's okay too. I think that's important to adjust your expectations of yourself when you're dealing with something like depression. And so, you know, if I'll give you an example. So I love swimming. When I'm swimming, when I'm feeling well, it fills me with a lot of joy. When I'm swimming, when I don't feel well, it's okay. It doesn't make me feel worse, though. So I think really adjusting our expectations, doing what we can in terms of following these tools that have helped us before, but also giving ourselves some grace and some wiggle room. I also think it's really important to not go through depression alone. So make sure that you're talking to a healthcare provider or to someone close to you that you can trust. If you have people close to you who have experienced depression, sometimes they're really good to talk to. People that know you well who can remind you of your resilience as well. Because sometimes when we're experiencing depression, we have these gray glasses on where we can't necessarily see our own resources and our own capacity. And it can be helpful to have people we love remind us of how we've gotten through it before. So that's one piece of it. And the other piece, as I said, is to give yourself grace a little bit. Give yourself credit for the small steps, like I said. So on a day, during a period when I'm doing well, I might do a whole bunch of things in a day. When I'm going through a period when my mood is low, I might do two things. And sometimes that feels like too much, right? So I think our view of ourselves and our situation gets a bit clouded when we're experiencing depression. So it can be helpful to check in with others, to get support from others, and to be patient, one foot in front of the other until it gets less bad. Depression doesn't last forever. There are tools. Certainly medicine can help some people. Therapeutic support helps people, and there are other tools as well. So get support, get help, but be patient. It also takes time, and set realistic expectations for yourself. When I'm depressed, I'm not going to suddenly start swimming 3 hours a day. For some people that may work. For me, that's not going to work. I'm not even going to go to the pool then. So just being a little bit more gentle with yourself and being sure you connect with others in these hard moments. That's what's been helpful for me, at least.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. All right, the next question I'm going to go to is about children. And I know there's a lot of MS families out there that do deal with this. So do you have some tips to help me help my children develop resiliency?
Yes, so there are some wonderful books out there. There are some really great materials for specifically supporting resilience in kids. One of the things that I have, to be fair, I don't have my own kids. I should be fair there. So I haven't experienced this as a parent, but in what I've seen personally and professionally with others and what I've talked to other parents about is the importance of modeling. So this is when your kids see you, for example, go for a walk or get support for hard feelings or take a break when you need to or prioritize rest or connection. These little lessons have a huge impact on kids potentially. That modeling is one of the best things we can do in terms of supporting the resilience of others. Now, depending on the age of the children, you also can have conversations with them. I think actually, as long as they're verbal, you can really have this conversation at any age. You can ask them the kinds of questions that I asked you today. You know, what things make you feel safe? What places make you feel good? What things do you like to do? And sort of reminding the child of those things in difficult moments Oh, I know that you love snuggling on the couch when we watch Paw Patrol. Is that something you want to do tonight? So giving the child choices, I think, is an important. You could do this or we could do this. Reminding them of what's helped them in the past, and modeling using your own tools, your own strategies for resilience, and having conversations with your kids about what helps you when things feel hard, or when you feel um, when, like you say, you feel anxious. When you feel anxious, what are some things that help? And I think giving voice to hard feelings, making it okay to say hard feelings out loud, that in itself, just like I said earlier in this presentation around saying the hard thing out loud takes away some of its power, that is really true with kids as well. So if you can create or facilitate, if it's not with you, somebody else, another trusted adult in their lives, somebody they can talk to where there's a place to put the hard stuff, that's another way to help kids to feel less alone and to shore up their resilience, I think.
I think that's wonderful advice. All right, the next question I'm going to go to is for caregivers. I'm here because my partner has MS, and I'm threading the needle between being supportive and helping her retain her autonomy. Can you lend any advice?
Okay, so this, my partner has Parkinson's. It's not the same as MS, I understand that, but I too have been uh, threading the needle, as you said, around finding that balance of how to be supportive, how to respect the other person's autonomy, and so on. And I don't think there's one way through this. I think, making sure that you can support the other person, support the person with the diagnosis, but you can and should also have support for yourself. So some place where you can talk as well, somebody else where you can put the hard things as well. Because in my experience, there's your path as a caregiver or care partner, there's the path of the person with the diagnosis, and then there's your path as a couple. So there's a lot of different potential challenges and strengths that come out of each of these paths. So I think sometimes the tendency when you are a partner or another support person is to say things like, oh, I don't have a right to feel this, or it's not my illness, I can't feel like this. I think all feelings are valid. And I think it's really, important for you to have an outlet, whether that's with another caregiver who has a similar experience, or whether that is, another peer option, or whether that is maybe it's going out and not talking about MS at all, just going out with a friend and doing something different. So making sure that you get your own support as well, and then respecting the other person's autonomy in terms of the decisions they make around their care and going forward. And something I have to keep reminding myself is we're not the same person. The way I would do it is not necessarily the way he does it. Doesn't mean my way is right. It just means my way is different. And so when I find myself getting my mitts too much in the mix, I mean, we have to have our mitts in there a little bit. It's a shared life. But when my mitts are too much in his business, and either he lets me know or I recognize that gives me a moment's pause to be like, you know what, I need to take a step back. I can support, I can love, but we are also each on our own paths here. We're walking alongside each other, but it's not my job to push him ahead of me or drag him behind me. That's not going to work for either of us. So I don't want to draw parallels if there aren't parallels there, but I think I do understand a little bit about what you might be going through. So I hope that's helpful.
I think that's wonderful advice. Thank you. All right, the next area I'm going to go to is people with MS who are facing different challenges alongside their diagnosis. And this is someone asking about how to keep resilience as their MS progresses. They're wondering, when do I have to use pharmaceuticals to help? I would assume they mean pharmaceuticals regarding depression.
So everybody's experience is different. I can't give one answer around that. I don't think that I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think resilience, for some people, taking care of themselves may include medicine. For others, it may not. It really depends on so many factors. So I don't think you use resilience until you can, and then you use the pharmaceuticals. I don't think it's one or the other. I think that resilience can always be there, no matter what other interventions you're using. Now, we don't always feel super resilient. I don't walk around all the time being like, oh, look how resilient I am. So certainly, but if we continue to return to things like who's in my life, what matters to me, what things make my life meaningful and joyful, what helps me to feel peaceful, how do I relax? If we return, and those things aren't going to be the same throughout our lifespan. So what looks like resilience for me now is not even what looked like resilience for me 10 years ago. And certainly, with a health diagnosis like MS or PD, that's going to change as well for people. But even without that diagnosis, I don't think resilience is a static thing. It depends on the supports we have, the resources we have access to, what's going on in our lives, our own capacity, and so on. So don't toss resilience out in favor of something else. It's always a potential there. But sometimes I want to just frame this a little bit differently, because I hope that people aren't listening to this going, oh, I don't have the energy to do anything right now. I must not be very resilient. Nope, that is not what I'm suggesting. Resilience looks different for different people in different moments. Even for me, sometimes resilience means having a small walk and managing to make one meal. Sometimes resilience means swimming, working, having 3 phone calls. Well, that's a busy day. But anyway, something like that, right? So it's not static, and it doesn't happen in isolation. If we're feeling, oh, I'm not really very resilient, maybe it means we need more rest. Maybe it means we don't have enough support and resources. In fact, I would love to read to you, it requires me getting up for 2 seconds, but I would love to read to you a beautiful quote about self-care versus community care. Can you hold on for just a moment?
Absolutely. We're here, Rebecca. You got it. I hope everyone is enjoying this presentation and conversation as much as I am, because there's some really, really good takeaways in everyday life. There she is.
I am back. Okay, wonderful. So I absolutely love this book. It is called How to Keep House While Drowning. How to Keep House While Drowning by K.C. Davis. And I will just read to you what she says about, and she has these wonderful suggestions around when care tasks like doing the dishes or having a shower are overwhelming. And for a lot of good reasons, for a lot of people, they really are. What can we do to take small steps towards that, to modify those tasks in a way that works for us? I think this is a beautiful way to look at self-care to make it more manageable for most of us. She says, quit beating yourself up for having a skill deficit when what you really have is a support deficit. Self-care was never meant to be a replacement for community care. Striving to be better will exhaust the little energy you have, and it's probably time better spent letting yourself cry and sleep and finding small pockets of joy to keep you going. A support deficit is not always someone's fault. There are just some seasons of life we have to limp through. So that's my favorite thing these days. K.C. Davis, How to Keep House While Drowning. Oops, clearly it's not my first day on a webinar, but I don't know what. There we go. Okay.
I love that quote. It's almost about forgiving yourself, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and not having these impossible, static, unrealistic standards about what care and resilience is. We need to be flexible in how we see ourselves and what's manageable, and I think that's really important.
All right, I have one last question I think I'm going to wrap up with here, and that is around supplements, because I know, again, this is a very popular topic of conversation within the MS community. Are there any supplements that help with mental health?
Again, so because I think that is something best discussed with your healthcare practitioner. Because everybody's situation is different. It depends what other medicines you are on, right? Some even supplements can have interactions with other medicines or with each other. So no, there isn't one in particular that I've that would recommend. I think it's important to ask the health professionals in your life and to get some advice from the people who know your regimen.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the end of our time just about here. So let me just do one last little, oh, here we go. I think this is probably a good a good spot to end on. How do you determine what are realistic expectations? So just like we were talking about finding that balance and being aware of where you are in life. There's someone asking, okay, how do I figure that out?
Well, that's good. That's not a one size fits all answer, and it's not even necessarily the same from day to day. I think one thing that can be helpful is to reflect for yourself, whether it's in writing or any kind of journaling, keeping track in that way, so you can kind of see how you're doing overall, and talking to people you trust about, is this realistic? Is this, am I expecting too much of myself or too little? So having people that are with you on that path who either in a similar experience or who know you well, they can be helpful in terms of reflecting back. And I think the most important thing is to be flexible with your expectations. In some days, in some moments, I have bigger expectations of myself than others. I think attending to what we need physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, is an ongoing process. And so sometimes there's more space to do stuff, and sometimes we need to slow down and be still and pause for a moment before we can decide our next step.
Rebecca, I want to thank you so much for your time and expertise with us today. We're so lucky to have you. That does bring us to the end of our time for questions, but I have found your presentation really, really valuable, and I hope the rest of our audience has as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone.
All right, so as we wrap up today's broadcast, we want to remind you about the MS Knowledge Network, which is staffed by trained navigators who provide consistent quality information and support. You can connect by phone, email, or live chat through the MS Society's website. And again, this is the place to find interactions and information that is trustworthy. And for your specific questions, any specific questions you may have submitted today that we couldn't get to, this is the place to go. Navigators can help you learn more about the programming and resources we offer to support individuals and families affected by MS. They can also help you find other community or government supports and programs, plus so much more. For information and support, always reach out to the MS Knowledge Network. Now, if you'd like to sign up for the monthly e-newsletter, an MS Navigator can help you do that as well. When you receive the e-news, you're kept up to date on the latest MS research and treatments, the Society's programs and services, fundraising, and volunteer opportunities. Inspirational personal stories are included in there from people affected by MS, and there's much more. All that can be delivered to your email inbox each month for free. Now, we want to invite you to be a part of the MS community, and we encourage you to get involved with our programs, services, events, government relations, and volunteer opportunities. These days, connecting with each other is more important than ever, and information is available on our website at www.mssociety.ca. Volunteers, like myself, are an essential part of the support we offer to Canadians affected by MS. The demand for assistance through our one-to-one peer support program and peer support groups is growing. We need more volunteers to reach as many people affected by MS as possible. If you'd like more information or you're interested in getting involved, please feel free to reach out to us via email at volunteer@mssociety.ca. If you have any questions or need support for this webinar or any of our education activities, you can reach out to the education team also by email, and they're at education@mssociety.ca. So on behalf of the MS Society of Canada, I want to really thank you for taking the time today to work on your own mental health and your own resilience and your own education, no matter where you are on your MS journey or on a loved one's MS journey. We thank you for tuning in to today's webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.